Nyalche Chembur Toto Ningmi Chang, Donen Manam Chembur, Nyalche Dankara Dargam Santo, Shermar, Tumba Turje Chan La Ki Shiom Sar, Nishan Roar Zer Nishan Gamsa, Jabur Tuji Shan Yelaman, Jimmy Panzo Jala, Soran. Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we will continue our teaching on the Shurangama Sutra. This Shurangama Sutra truly is, we might not know it if we don't study it, but after studying it, everyone should come to understand its profound meaning. In fact, whether it is a sutra or a shastra, merely reading it once is probably not enough to learn it thoroughly. We must either explain it very well or listen to it very carefully ourselves. And then, if we contemplate its meaning, only then can we truly understand it. Some people often say, I have read the Diamond Sutra, I have read the Lotus Sutra, I have read the Vimalakirti Sutra, or I have read the Shurangama Sutra. Of course, reading them is very good, and I rejoice in your merit. However, I worry that just reading them once, like reading a novel, might mean their profound meanings cannot truly integrate into your heart. I do have my doubts about that. Therefore, if we are going to study in the future, we should do so solidly and study deeply. If we do this, within every sutra and shastra, there are incredibly subtle and profound meanings. They are truly inconceivable. I sometimes think about how actually within our sutras and shastras there must be so many more teachings. It's just that in our brief human lives we don't have the opportunity to study all of them. If we could study all of them indeed, of the many scriptures and treatises hidden in our sutra libraries, if we had the chance to study them one by one, that would truly be wondrous and incredibly fascinating. However, in this brief human life it might not be possible. We can only study a portion of them. If we truly studied the Buddha's wisdom point by point, we would undoubtedly gain immense benefit. Recently, as we look at the Shurangama Sutra, for every question and every metaphor, when each principle is analyzed, the Buddha's wisdom is truly wonderfully beyond words. Everyone feels like, how could this question be answered like this? And as for these metaphors, they are just everyday occurrences from our daily lives. But when described with the Buddha's wisdom, they become remarkably profound. Everyone should be clear about this significance. So, today we will continue discussing the Tathagatagarbha, because the previous metaphor of space from yesterday is very important. Space itself does not have any appearance, yet it does not reject any appearance either. When causes and conditions come together, light, darkness, and everything else manifest within space. The true essence of space is nothing at all. By the same token, our Tathagatagarbha is actually nothing, yet it is everything. It is free from is and is not, and also free from not is and not is not. Such a profound meaning is indeed somewhat, you could say it's inconceivable. Why do we say that the prajna paramita ultimately reaches an inconceivable and ultimate state? This is the very reason why. Today we will discuss thus the matrix of the Thus Come One, the fundamental, wondrous, perfect mind. This perfect and luminous wisdom, what is it like? Next, he speaks from a world-transcending perspective. That is to say, from a world-transcending point of view, it is not of the mundane world. In our mundane world, this includes the 4 elements, the 6 faculties, the 12 bases, the 18 realms, the 5 aggregates, and so on. However, in reality, our Tathagatagarbha mind can be said to be none of these. Then later on, it is said that it is all of these. in the mundane world is and is not are completely contradictory. So how could both appear within the same single entity? Actually, these two are not contradictory. Next, we can explain that our Tathagatagarbha mind is not the distinction-making mind, nor is it space, nor is it earth, nor water, nor wind, nor fire. Here it speaks of the 7 elements. When it says it is not the mind includes perception and consciousness. Therefore, the Tathagatagarbha is neither perception nor consciousness. Furthermore, it is not space, not the earth, not water, not wind, and not fire. This means that the 7 elements are not the Tathagatagarbha. These, in fact, are spoken from the perspective of ordinary beings. The domains of earth, water, fire, and wind are all at the level of understanding of ordinary people. Therefore, the Tathagatagarbha is not these. You could say it is not the Dharma of ordinary beings. First of all, it is not the 7 elements. Then, here it mentions the 12 bases. The Tathagatagarbha mind is not the eye faculty, nor the ear faculty, nor the nose faculty, nor the tongue faculty, nor the body faculty, nor the cognitive faculty. Neither is it visible objects, nor sounds, nor odors, nor flavors, nor objects of touch, nor objects of cognition. The Tathagatagarbha is actually neither the 6 faculties nor the 6 sense objects. Thus it is not the 12 bases either. The Tathagatagarbha is not the eye consciousness, nor the mind consciousness, nor any of the other consciousnesses. From not being the eye consciousness to not being the ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind consciousnesses, all the way through the realms of consciousness. In this way, the 6 faculties, 6 objects, and 6 consciousnesses we just mentioned, added together, make up the 18 realms. The entire 18 realms are not the Tathagatagarbha. All the above are not mundane dharmas. The Tathagatagarbha is not a mundane dharma. Then below, it speaks of it not being the dharma of the solitary realizer. What does this mean? The Tathagatagarbha is neither the fundamental ignorance that is the adding of an understanding to our inherent enlightenment, nor the ending of that ignorance, nor is it old age and death, nor the ending of old age and death. This passage indicates it is not the dharma of the solitary realizer, because the Tathagatagarbha in truth is neither understanding nor ignorance. If we observe from the perspectives of forward and reverse dependent origination, generally speaking, the 12 links go from ignorance to old age and death, or from the ending of ignorance to the ending of old age and death. This range represents the forward flow of the 12 links of dependent origination, or the process of reversal for contemplation and practice. Pratyeka Buddhas rely on this Dharma to achieve their realization. However, the Tathagatagarbha is not the 12 links of dependent origination or the Dharma of the solitary realizer, because within its essence there is no such thing. So, in the first layer, all things before the Tathagatagarbha, from form all the way up to omniscient wisdom, are meant to be extinguished. Next, it is not the Dharma of the hearers. The Tathagatagarbha is not the Dharma of the hearers. How is this explained? Neither is it the fundamentally unsatisfying nature of existence, nor is it the accumulation of the causes of dissatisfaction, nor the ending of dissatisfaction, nor the path to the ending of dissatisfaction. It is neither wisdom nor the attaining of wisdom. In this context, the Tathagatagarbha regarding the Four Noble Truths is not the truth of suffering, nor the truth of accumulation, nor the truth of cessation, nor the truth of the path. It is not even wisdom or attainment. This is explaining that it is not the Dharma of the hearers. Next, it explains that the Tathagatagarbha is actually not the Dharma of the Bodhisattvas. It is not the Bodhisattva Dharma. The Bodhisattva Dharma is spoken from the perspective of the 6 paramitas, or the 10 paramitas. So what is the Tathagatagarbha like? Not dana, speaking of the perfection of giving. It is not giving. Not shila, not the perfection of ethical discipline. Not virya, patience, not ksanti being vigor, not dhyana, meditative concentration, not prajna, which is the perfection of wisdom, not paramita. Paramita means reaching the other shore. Here the former refers to the perfection of intelligence and the latter to the perfection of wisdom, and the latter part is the true non-dual prajna paramita. These are the bodhisattva dharmas. Bodhisattvas rely on the 6 paramitas to manifest their realization. But within the Tathagatagarbha, these 6 paramitas or 7 paramitas are completely unobtainable. Next it says it is not the Buddha Dharma, not the realization of the enlightenment of the Buddha, who is the thus come one, the Arhat, the one of right and universal wisdom. It is not the permanence, the bliss, the true self, or the purity of the great nirvana. So the Tathagatagarbha, from what we call the 6 paramitas all the way to the very end. Not the thus come one. Tathagata means the thus come one, the well gone one. Arhat. Arhat means one worthy of offerings, a great Arhat, meaning an Arhat. Samyak Sambodhi, perfectly and fully awakened, or the one of right and universal wisdom. In other words, the Tathagatagarbha is not the so-called thus come one, nor is it the so-called Arhat, one worthy of offerings, nor is it the perfectly and fully awakened one. Going through all 10 titles of the Buddha, observing them one by one, and finally the manifestation of the Buddha, the state of great nirvana, this great fruition, is also not the true Tathagatagarbha. Then not permanence, not bliss, not true self, not purity, permanence, bliss, true self, purity. That is to say, even the most ultimate fruition of the Buddha is actually not permanent, nor is it blissful, nor is it a true self, nor is it pure. Therefore, it cannot be established that the Tathagatagarbha is the Buddha Dharma. It is not any of these things, be they mundane or world-transcending. So these are because of this reason, it is because they are neither mundane nor world-transcending, not mundane and not world-transcending. This will also be explained below. Here, in fact, both mundane and world-transcending can be transcended. The principle of transcending the world transcending here, there are 2 aspects to mundane and world transcending. One is the mundane within the realm of ordinary beings, where these mundane dharmas cannot be established. Then the world transcending, from Shravaka Arhats to Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, the dharmas of these world transcending states do not exist either within the true basic expanse of the Tathagatagarbha. In fact, all of these are completely unobtainable. Yesterday we talked about how in space, although all kinds of dharmas manifest, whether it be light or darkness or clarity or a reflection in water, are these space. They are not space. They can indeed manifest, but these manifestations are actually not space itself. So for us, previously, many things, big or small, expansion and concentration, might have been a bit difficult to understand. But now with microchips and technology, including computers and such, regarding these inconceivable dharmas, we can perhaps understand them a little better. For example, the various programs installed on our computers. Data that takes up many gigabytes can be reduced to something very, very small, and in a very short amount of time they can disappear into the Dharmadhatu, and they can also manifest again. As long as the causes and conditions are present, they can manifest and they can be hidden. In the process of us operating them, especially in today's technology, there are many similar things that ordinary people would find hard to imagine. These can rely on our mundane technology to be operated. Therefore, with many of these technologies that we are currently using, I feel these inconceivable principles should also be understood. For instance, some of us know how to use them, but we don't know their underlying principles. Their principles are also ungraspable. I sometimes think inside a tiny, tiny USB drive, you can store so many things. Such causes and conditions are quite inconceivable. When you
you plug it into a computer, everything manifests on a very large screen. You can even open them wirelessly, or our current audio and video files, so many of these types of things. As long as the causes and conditions are complete, these dharmas can manifest. Didn't we talk yesterday about the earth, water, fire and wind of the four directions? Whoever has the causes and conditions, they can manifest for them. If there are no causes and conditions, they cannot manifest either. Therefore, regarding the Tathagatagarbha and many other things, ordinarily we might feel they are a bit contradictory or somewhat impossible. But in reality, within our conventional world of seeing, hearing, feeling and knowing, many are just like this. Even though in terms of principles we can't fully explain it, including sometimes people who are quite proficient with computers, if you ask them to explain it, they can't. But if you ask them to operate it very quickly, for instance, they can draw a 3D model. The other day, I had one of our volunteer workers make one for a monastery, showing its walls, and when he was operating it, in a very short time, he could completely render it. But if you asked him to explain the principles, why it is three-dimensional, why it's not a flat 2D image, he might say, oh, well, if you press this here, it will show up like this. He is just familiar with it. Other than that, if you asked him why, before our eye consciousness, a true three-dimensional object appears, he wouldn't necessarily be able to explain the reasoning. Sometimes it is also inconceivable. Therefore, these principles, for example, as frequently taught in the Zen school, do not establish a single dharma, do not reject a single dharma. Within the true state of realization, you shouldn't establish any single dharma, but neither do you need to abandon a single dharma. Refuting and establishing must both be refuted, but in the process of refuting, there is a wonderfully inexpressible state that need not be refuted. So sometimes, I think, for instance, in our Tibetan Buddhism, there are actually quite a few schools, but having many schools might also have a benefit. What is the benefit? Because each school might emphasize certain key points of the Buddha's views, and they can focus on explaining those. For example, the Jonang school's wonderful application of the Tathagatagarbha, they have commented on this quite extensively, including the study of the Kalachakra or the Uttara Tantra Shastra. Many of their commentaries place great importance on this aspect. And for the Gelug school, they primarily speak from the perspective of emptiness and analyze through logic. They are very skilled in this area. Then for the Sakya school, they place more emphasis on the aspect of practice. Of course, each has its sutras, shastras, and tantras. As for the Nyingma school, regarding the mind's luminosity and emptiness being an uncontradictory unity, there are many tantric sources to support this. It also includes some sutra sources, and it is explained very well. The Buddha's thought itself is as vast as the ocean, with all kinds of variations. If these great masters can completely master the Buddha's secret intent, they can, from different perspectives, enter into its most profound depths. Of course, if these practitioners have not mastered the true original face of the thus come one's wisdom, and start fighting with each other purely on a superficial level, then perhaps, other than creating negative karma, it doesn't have much meaning. Next we can say, yet it is the matrix of the thus come one. Earlier we said, it is not, it is not, it is not, the whole way through. And now below, it is, it is, it is, it is. So this seems very contradictory. As Mipham Rinpoche also said in the Beacon of Certainty, it looks contradictory, but actually it does not conflict. Moreover, it has an even more profound meaning, including when we observe our own minds. It is the same. This is quite easy. When we observe our own minds from the perspective of emptiness, you truly cannot find even a single atom. But from the perspective of luminosity, there is still a clear and vivid awareness. If we try to describe these two with words, we are at a loss. When we analyze this in theory, our minds are also like this. The true nature of all dharmas is too. There is no non-empty dharma, yet an empty dharma cannot be grasped either. Buddhism offers incredibly subtle and wondrous, highly precise and sharp insights. This is something we can accept for ourselves. It is not asking you to accept it based on blind faith, but to accept it through wisdom. The Tathagatagarbha, as mentioned earlier, from the elements of earth, water, fire and wind, all the way to Buddhahood, it is none of these. This was already explained. Then below it says, yet it is the matrix of the thus come one. It is the distinction-making mind, it is space, it is earth, it is water, it is wind, and it is fire. If an ordinary worldly person heard this, they'd say it is completely wrong. Look, earlier it said it is not these things, and now it says the Tathagatagarbha is one's own mind, because perception and consciousness are both included within the mind. It is space, it is the earth, it is water, it is wind, it is fire, it is all 7 elements. It is the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, the body faculty, and the cognitive faculty. It is visible objects, it is sounds, it is odors, it is flavors, it is objects of touch, and it is objects of cognition. It is the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, and all the other consciousnesses. In this way, as just mentioned, all these dharmas of ordinary beings they are all the Tathagatagarbha, because in conventional truth, indeed, in our world, these can manifest. They manifest before the karmic perception of each sentient being when karma has ripened. Then, speaking from the perspective of the solitary realizer's dharma, it is that fundamental ignorance which is the adding of an understanding to our inherent enlightenment, and it is the ending of that ignorance. It is old age and death, and the ending of old age and death. This above section describes the Dharma of the solitary realizer. In conventional truth, solitary realizers indeed rely on such dharmas to ultimately achieve awakening. Then comes the Dharma of the hearers. It is also the fundamentally unsatisfying nature of existence, the accumulation of the causes of dissatisfaction, the ending of dissatisfaction, and the path to the ending of dissatisfaction. It is wisdom and the attaining of wisdom. This is the Dharma of the hearers, and in conventional truth, they are all these as well. Next is the Bodhisattva Dharma. It is Dena, it is Shala, it is Virya, it is Ksanti, it is Dhyana, it is Prajna, it is Paramita. This is the Bodhisattva Dharma. And then the Buddha Dharma. It is everything, including the thus come one. Tathagata means the thus come one, as mentioned earlier. Who is the Arhat and the one of right and universal wisdom? It is the great nirvana. It is permanence, bliss, true self, and purity. It is every one of these, be they mundane or world-transcending. These are actually all mundane dharmas, from ordinary beings to world-transcending dharmas, up to and including the fruition of Buddhahood. It should be it is. It is all of these. Earlier it said it is none of them, and now it says it is all of them. It is like in the Maharatnakuta Sutra. The wise one does not see appearances, nor does he see non-appearances. As for a wise person, they do not see appearances, but neither do they not see non-appearances. This is the principle. Sometimes when we say form is emptiness, emptiness is form, many people don't understand the meaning. But if you truly analyze it, it is very easy to understand. This is what was just said. The Tathagatagarbha is none of these dharmas. In short, it's like this. The Tathagatagarbha is all dharmas. It is like this. So, do it is, and it is not, contradict each other. It says below that these two do not contradict. How do they not contradict? To be all of these is what the matrix of the thus come one is. Earlier it said the fundamental, wondrous, perfect mind. And even earlier, the fundamental, wondrous, perfect mind. So perhaps in the original Sanskrit, it might not have been like this. I see that in the Tibetan translation, it is basically the original luminous mind. It's translated roughly like that. Perhaps to avoid repetition and to sound more pleasing, they kept swapping around terms like wondrous, luminous, and fundamental. It makes us all dizzy. Is it wondrous and luminous, or luminous and wondrous? Or is it awakened and wondrous, awakened and luminous, or luminous and awakened? These terms are swapped around quite a lot. Luminous and awakened, wondrous and awakened, wondrous and luminous, luminous and wondrous, awakened and luminous, awakened and wondrous, and so on. Actually, they all share one meaning, referring to the wondrous mind of the Tathagatagarbha, our mind, in which the Tathagatagarbha and luminosity are indivisible, is apart from is and is not, and yet both is and is not. This sentence is quite unique. It means that the luminous Tathagatagarbha actually transcends it is. Didn't it say earlier that everything is it is? At the same time, it also transcends it is not. In this way, both it is and it is not mentioned previously have been completely refuted. This refutes both mundane and world-transcending dharmas. Apart from is and is not, in fact, in the true sense, mundane and world-transcending dharmas cannot be found even to the extent of a single atom. Within the true nature, the ultimate reality, is cannot be found, and is not cannot be found either. When we frequently study Madhyamaka, we speak of transcending the four extremes and eight fabrications, not coming and not going, not permanent and not annihilated, not one and not different, and other such analytical observations. Or transcending existence, non-existence, both existence and non-existence, and neither existence nor non-existence, transcending these four extremes. Therefore, from the perspective of its true essence here, it refutes both the mundane and world-transcending. That is to say, both it is and it is not are refuted. Then, within manifestation, or temporarily when necessary, it both is and is not. In other words, it establishes both mundane and world-transcending dharmas. The Tathagatagarbha is these things, as mentioned earlier, from earth, water, fire, and wind, all the way up to Buddhahood. It is all of them. The Tathagatagarbha is all of them, and then is not. As explained earlier, the Tathagatagarbha is not them. In the mundane world, we can establish this concept that it both is and is not. This is the principle. Then below, how then, with their conscious minds, could beings who are bound to worlds in the three realms of existence, or even world-transcending hearers of the teaching and the solitary sages, possibly fathom the supreme awakening of the thus come ones? How could they gain the Buddha's ability to know and to see merely by using the world's words? Below is a question. Since this is the case, these sentient beings in the three realms of worldly samsara, or the world-transcending hearers and solitary realizers, how can they know? How can their minds fathom or know the supreme awakening of the thus come one? Or how can these mundane and world-transcending beings use worldly language to enter the wondrous wisdom of the Buddha? Here, one point is about thinking. As for thinking, how do we enter the Buddha's state of mind? And how can we use language to express the Buddha's most ultimate and inconceivable state? In fact, in the true sense, the Buddha's mind is also inconceivable. As the commentary pointing to the palm of the Shurangama Sutra says, it can only be known by wisdom, not perceived by consciousness. What does this mean? It means it can be known through wisdom, but it cannot be fathomed by the conceptual mind. This implies that true mundane beings and world-transcending practitioners, when approaching the supreme awakening and wondrous wisdom of the Buddha, might not be able to express it clearly with language, nor can they necessarily fathom, measure, or analyze it using their conceptual minds. It is not certain they can. Below, there is an analogy to illustrate this. Marvelous sounds can be brought forth from Chin and Se, Kong Hu and Pipa, only when there are skilled fingers to play them. This is an analogy. For example, our worldly musical instruments, whether it is a Chin and Se, Kong Hu or Pipa. In Tibetan texts, pipas can have 7 strings, 25 strings, or 14 strings. There are different types of pipas depending on their strings, so they are given different names like Chin or Kong Hu. These Konghouse, Chin and Se, and pipas mentioned earlier are also introduced in another Buddhist sutra. Whether it's this sutra or another one, I won't elaborate here. These instruments, although they can produce wondrous sounds, without a truly skilled finger to play them, they can never produce sound. Skilled fingers are crucial. A person's fingers are very important. For example, when playing the flute, some people have very good fingering techniques, but others, no matter what they do, just can't play it well. In the past, we would hold one every day, but if you don't have skilled fingers, you can't play it. It's the same with the pipa now. Some people seem to just be fumbling with it. The sound they make is unpleasant. They can't bring out its true sound. Although it contains sound, it cannot be produced. In the same way, all beings, including you, are fully endowed with the resplendent, enlightened, true mind. Purna, you and other sentient beings are also like this. Although sentient beings possess the Tathagatagarbha without a skilled finger or profound pith instructions, it probably cannot be brought forth. Some of us are always trying to bring it forth but haven't learned how. There's a problem with our skilled fingers. You and all sentient beings are like this too. Like what? It says here, resplendent, enlightened, true mind. The precious, awakened, true mind is like a jewel. As for the Tathagatagarbha, every sentient being possesses it completely and perfectly without any flaws. When I arrange my fingers to form the ocean mudra, the light of the ocean mudra samadhi shines forth. But without the blessings of the Buddha or the guidance of a master, we probably have no way to bring forth the light of awareness. If I, the Buddha says, when I arrange my fingers, meaning using the profound instructions found in the Buddha's definitive sutras or tantras to arrange my fingers, then the ocean mudra shines forth. Ocean mudra is often mentioned in the Avatamsaka Sutra as the ocean mudra samadhi. This refers to a samadhi that arises vast and profound like an ocean. It means a meditative state that truly comprehends the original face of the Tathagatagarbha. Then the light of the ocean mudra can shine forth. If we receive guidance like that of the Buddha giving us teachings, then indeed the light of the ocean mudra of the perfect true mind that is inherently present in our Tathagatagarbha can shine forth, even if we have not met the Buddha himself, but instead meet an authentically realized master. Not someone who just recites from a book and reads to everyone, but a master who has genuine experience and genuine realization, who uses his skilled fingers to guide us. Then the light of our ocean mudra is very likely to shine forth. But the moment a thought arises in your mind, you must endure the stress of involvement with perceived objects. However, the Buddha says it is quite a pity. What is a pity? Purna, your mind momentarily gave rise to conceptual thoughts because you didn't truly recognize it at that time, and in an instant a conceptual thought appeared in your mind. Once this conceptual thought arose, you failed to recognize your own true nature. As a result, you become involved with perceived objects. Perceived objects refer to various external phenomena manifesting one after another. The stress of involvement refers to affliction, suffering, and delusion manifesting continuously in succession. It is a great pity. Originally, with the Buddha's skilled fingers pointing it out slightly, you could have become awakened, but unfortunately, you didn't recognize it. Actually, it's the same for all of us sitting here. If we rely slightly on the Master's teachings to examine our minds, perhaps we too could suddenly awaken. However, because we haven't confessed our misdeeds well, and we harbor all sorts of selfish thoughts and haven't purified the afflictions of our past lives, due to all these reasons, we don't know if we can attain awakening in this very life. Each of us must pray sincerely to clear away the obstacles on our spiritual path. It goes on to say, it is simply because you have not diligently pursued the path to supreme enlightenment. Instead, you are fond of the lesser vehicle and are content with a lesser goal. Here, he is criticizing some practitioners of the lesser vehicle. Why are we unable to practice well? What is the reason for this? Actually, our failure to diligently pursue the correct path of Supreme Bodhi is fundamentally because we are fond of the lesser vehicle, fond of selfishness and self-interest. In the end, it boils down to self-grasping. Why is it that despite relying on the teachings of the Buddha and Masters, we are unable to awaken in this brief human life? Actually, the main reason is that we haven't generated bodhicitta properly. We only cling to our own insignificant petty interests. With such a selfish mind, we feel that what we have is enough, harboring a sense of complacency. Because of this, we haven't attained liberation from samsara in the past, and it will be very difficult to achieve in the future as well. In fact, every one of us harbors this kind of complacency. If I don't attain liberation, so be it. As long as I have food to eat and clothes to wear, it's fine. As long as today is lived happily, do any of us possess a particularly strong, burning desire thinking, I absolutely must attain realization in this life. I absolutely must benefit sentient beings. We lack such a strong aspiration. Many people think, well, I'll just study a bit. The main thing is that I'm healthy and that's enough. Whatever, I'll just study a little. But fundamentally, it's the viper-like mind of self-grasping. The mind of self-grasping is terrifying. The mindset of the lesser vehicle still involves selfishness. But I think what's even more serious than the lesser vehicle mindset is our own selfish, self-serving mind. Once we have this, it becomes the greatest obstacle to liberation. Some people say, I've been studying Buddhism for so many years and I've lived at Larungar for such a long time, yet I still haven't attained awakening. Why is that? Fundamentally, you should reflect and ask yourself every day, am I acting like the great masters of the past, completely abandoning all selfishness, single-mindedly benefiting sentient beings and generating bodhicitta? Have I done this? Every one of us, perhaps due to past karma, or perhaps due to our lack of effort in this life or our laziness. Indeed, we might talk about how many years we've been ordained here, but in reality, throughout the 24 hours of a day, do I have a truly sincere heart, just like worldly lovers, a mind that constantly longs for and seeks liberation? Without ever forgetting it, when you examine your own conscience, you can answer this question for yourself. Next, this is Purna. You see, Ananda has been completely out of the picture. As I mentioned the other day, Ananda feels it's no longer his problem now. He's ignoring it. He might be outside doing whatever. The Venerable Purna says the Thus Come One and I are alike in that we are both fully endowed with the precious, awakened, perfect, luminous, true, wondrous, pure mind that understands. Actually, the Buddha and I, from the perspective of our true nature, whether it is the precious, awakened, perfect, luminous mind or the true, wondrous, pure mind, we are both alike and fully endowed with them. Every one of us sentient beings possesses such a perfect awakened nature. The Buddha has a perfect awakened nature, that goes without saying. Venerable Purna has it as well, including all of us studying here today. Everyone possesses it. However, nevertheless, for a time without beginning, I was plagued with the deluded acts of my mind, and for a long time I was bound to the cycle of death and rebirth. Although I have since become a sage, my enlightenment is not fully perfected. Then he begins. Now, Venerable Purna begins his own self-reflection. He says, "Although I have such excellent resources, this perfectly wondrous awakened nature, I was plagued by the attacks and assaults of deluded thoughts from beginningless time. Because of this, for countless millions of eons, he has been drowning and constantly drifting in samsara. But now, relying on the kindness of the Buddha and spiritual friends, he has encountered and attained the holy vehicle. However, he still truly has not perfected his enlightenment. The Tibetan translation says it is still very far away. Although he has attained the holy vehicle, the supreme vehicle, which probably refers to the Mahayana, reaching the ultimate state, is still out of reach, extraordinarily far away." Venerable Purna says, "World-honored one, so that only what is wondrous, true, and everlasting remains." Actually, world-honored one, if all these deluded thoughts, as mentioned earlier, because they come from deluded thoughts, are completely eliminated, what does he wish to attain? This sole true mind. Venerable Purna's idea is quite beautiful. He wants to completely eliminate deluded thoughts and attain the true original mind. So, wanting to do this, he asks the world-honored one, "I venture to ask the thus come one why all beings suffer from delusion. Why do they keep covered their wondrous luminous understanding so that they continue to be submerged in samsara?" He says, "I would like to take the liberty of asking the thus come one, Buddha, please don't be angry. I want to ask a question. The question is," this is something he's kept bottled up inside for a long time. "Today is an opportunity, so I need to ask a question. Currently, the reason I am different from the Buddha is because of deluded thoughts causing trouble. I really want to eliminate deluded thoughts and truly recognize my own nature. But what I want to ask today is, what are the causes and conditions for the deluded thoughts of all sentient beings, for deluded thoughts to cover our wondrous, luminous mind themselves?" He wants to ask about deluded thoughts, and because of this they have been drowning in samsara since beginningless time. So when many of us ask questions like, where does ignorance come from? Like, where do deluded thoughts come from? All of this is a common question. So how is it answered here? Everyone can also think about it. Venerable Purna asked the thus come one, why all beings suffer from delusion? Why is it? What kind of cause is there for having such deluded thoughts? Why do they keep covered their wondrous, luminous understanding, their original face, so that they continue to be submerged in samsara? Why is this? He asked in this way. It seems that in some commentaries it says, earlier we also asked about the mountains, rivers, and the great earth. Since sentient beings possess the Tathagatagarbha, why do mountains, rivers, and the great earth manifest? This primarily addresses the cause of a single thought of ignorance. Then what is being asked here? What exactly is ignorance? What is the cause of ignorance? Earlier the question was about the cause that gives rise to confusion. At that time, the Buddha said it was due to ignorance. So what are we asking here? You ask, what is the cause of this ignorance? Where did the very first ignorance come from? Where does ignorance come from? This is a question many people have, including just a couple of days ago, some people asked this very question. The Buddha said to Purna, this sentence is very important, everyone should remember it and perhaps write it down. The Buddha told Venerable Purna, you have put your coarser doubts to rest, but your more subtle doubts have not yet been ended. Although you are different from the other disciples, your doubts should have greatly diminished and been dispelled. But there are still some subtle doubts, some remaining obstacles, including afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations that have not yet been completely eliminated. He certainly still has certain obstacles. You can tell just by the questions being asked, not to mention the Buddha. Even we can sometimes tell. Venerable Purna, although he was formidable at giving teachings, I will now question you about this matter by referring to a mundane event. The Buddha said, I will use a common, very ordinary and well-known mundane event to ask you a question first instead. Generally speaking, when someone asks us a question, answering with a question first is quite important. Sometimes when I go to schools, I directly ask them a question in return. Then, when they cannot answer, I come up with the answer for them. This is sometimes necessary as well. Then the Buddha said, I will ask you a mundane question. Have you not heard about Yajnadatta, the man from Shravasti, who saw a face with perfectly clear features in the mirror one morning? He said, have you not heard recently? Perhaps this incident was in the news at the time. In the city of Shravasti, there was a man named Yajnadatta. This is a person's name. Recently, in our city, wasn't there a piece of news known to every household? Wasn't there a man, and this man suddenly woke up in the morning and looked in the mirror. He was probably someone who particularly loved looking in the mirror. Whether it was a man or a woman, we don't know. Suddenly, when he got up in the morning, he might have groggily started looking in the mirror. He loved the head in the mirror with perfectly clear features. Normally he loved looking in the mirror. When he looked in the mirror, I don't know, it seems mirrors in ancient India were like bronze mirrors. They weren't as clear as our mirrors today, but in this mirror his features were clearly visible. He could see them regularly, but that day perhaps, who knows, maybe he was groggy in the morning, and without even opening his eyes fully, he went to look in the mirror. Then he became upset because he supposed he had lost his own face. It struck him that he must have turned into a headless ghost. For no good reason he ran madly out of his house. It directly says that when he looked in the mirror he found he had no head and no face. Then he panicked, thinking he was being disturbed by a monster. He became afraid for no reason. His mind went mad and he ran away. In some commentaries this became upset with his own head means he was dissatisfied with his head. Perhaps when he looked in the mirror, I don't know, the text doesn't state the reason, but maybe there was some kind of demon or ghost in the mirror disturbing him, so his own face didn't appear. Or perhaps it was just himself. Generally, when we wake up in the morning, sometimes when we leave the house, our walking isn't even fully coordinated. So perhaps it was a kind of confusion of his or a kind of hallucination. In any case, his vision was blurred or he had heat stroke or whatever it was. It's not very clear. The point is he did not see his own face. He thought he had no head. He became terrified, thinking he must be possessed. For no good reason, he ran madly. He, for no reason at all, went crazy and mad right after waking up, and then he ran off. Actually, by looking in the mirror, he brought this upon himself. Other than that, there was no reason. What do you think? What caused this man to run madly about for no good reason? The Buddha asked. Purna, what do you think? This man ran madly away for no reason. Was there any cause or condition? Why did this man run madly away? Purna replied, he was clearly insane. That and nothing else was the cause. Because there was no other reason for this person. He simply went insane himself. He just went mad. What else could it be? There was no other cause. He just looked in the mirror himself and then bafflingly ran away. The Buddha asked, so what is this cause? It's just that his mind went crazy. Other than that, nothing. There is no other reason. It wasn't that someone came and chopped off his head. And it wasn't that a real magician came and concealed his head. It wasn't anything like that. Perhaps in the process of looking himself he didn't see clearly, or this is not stated. The fact is, this person just went crazy himself and left. There was nothing else to it. Actually, everyone needs to remember this parable. If someone asks in the future, what is the cause of our ignorance? The cause of ignorance is nothing, it's just ignorance. That's how it is. Speaking of this parable and this story, I think it is quite excellent. The Buddha continued explaining to him below, the luminous understanding of wondrous enlightenment is perfect. That fundamental, perfect, luminous understanding is wondrous. Frequently swapping these terms, luminous, perfect, fundamental, swapping them around is quite interesting. This luminous mind of the Tathagatagarbha is originally perfect and luminous. How could there be in it any basis for what is clearly a delusion? This Tathagatagarbha, how could it have a cause for deluded thoughts? How could there be a cause? There is no cause. Since it is called a deluded thought, didn't we just say that we are originally pure, but because of deluded thoughts, we drift in samsara? But how could a deluded thought have a cause? It has no cause. And if there were a basis for this delusion, how could it be what we call deluded? I think this sentence is very important. If someone asks, then what is the cause of ignorance? You say there is no cause. If there were a basis for this delusion, how could it be what we call deluded? If it had a cause, this cause would definitely be something real. And how could something real be called a delusion? Because a real thing produces a real dharma, then it wouldn't be called a delusion. So why is it called a deluded thought? Because it doesn't have a real cause. So it is called a delusion. That person from earlier, that person went insane himself. If he just went insane and left, no, he had no true condition. He went insane on his own. If he went insane on his own, what cause could there be? I feel that regarding this matter truly, everyone should remember it well. Thus your deluded thoughts have followed one upon another, each one leading to the next. Confusion is added to confusion, eon after countless eon, numberless as motes of dust. Therefore, for us sentient beings actually, this single deluded thought arises without cause or reason. After this single deluded thought arises, the former acts as the cause and the latter acts as the effect. They continuously follow one upon another as causes. Then confusion is added to confusion. Within the cause of confusion there is no actual cause. Within this cause of confusion, confusion is produced again and again. It continuously multiplies and accumulates the causes of confusion. Because of this, eon after countless eon, numberless as motes of dust, throughout countless innumerable eons, we have been submerged in samsara. Through today's class, I think many people should have a clearer understanding now. We used to discuss, when did ignorance come about? Ignorance didn't come about from anywhere. If a person goes insane, what is the reason for their insanity? He just made a mistake while looking in the mirror himself. Why are we drifting in samsara? Each one of us at that time was perhaps just like looking in the mirror. Actually, why do we act so mad and rush about like this? Or why are we like this? This is it. This is a question many of us struggle with. Therefore, in the Shurangama Sutra, this is truly very important. In the Sutra of the vast, adorned, pure, irreversible wheel, it says, ignorance, when directly seen, ultimately cannot be produced. Regarding this ignorance, when ignorance is directly seen, it cannot be produced. Just like a reflection in water, from beginning to end, it possesses nothing. Just like a reflection in water, from beginning to end, it possesses nothing. It explains here that speaking of directly seeing ignorance, it has never been produced from the very beginning. Just like a reflection in water, it has never existed from beginning to end. We look and see a reflection in the water. Regarding the manifestation of this reflection, where is the cause of this reflection in the water? Actually, the reflection in the water itself has no substantial entity. Since it has no substantial entity, how can its cause be found? It cannot be found. Therefore, for us sentient beings, the cause of ignorance is causeless. If it had a cause, as mentioned earlier, and if there were a basis for this delusion, How could it be what we call deluded? Everyone should remember this. If someone asks, the Shurangama Sutra says, and if there were a basis for this delusion, how could it be what we call deluded? You don't need to answer further. A person with wisdom will understand. You should answer in this way. Therefore, we sentient beings have been submerged in samsara all along, suffering for kalpas as numerous as sand grains, exactly for this reason. Although the Buddha can reveal this process to you, he cannot reverse it for you. Therefore, beings are not aware of the cause of their confusion, because they do not realize that confusion is based only on confusion. Their confusion persists. Our immensely compassionate Buddha, although in various sutras he has clearly and plainly proclaimed this to us, perhaps we sentient beings, because the cause of our confusion is so deeply ingrained, have been unable to go home, unable to turn back. For example, the person mentioned earlier, he believed he had no head, and then he went insane, becoming a mad beggar, when others tell him, you should just go back and live your life normally. You don't need to be afraid. You don't have this cause. But this person, because at the moment he went insane, the conditions were perhaps quite peculiar, so he simply had no way to return to being a normal person like before. We sentient beings are just like this. Even though the Buddha has explained it to us, and spiritual friends have also explained it, our own deeply rooted habitual tendencies make it very difficult to turn back. Therefore, beings are not aware of the cause of their confusion, because they do not realize that confusion is based only on confusion. Their confusion persists. The reason we have such a cause for illusory confusion is because this confusion itself is present right in the moment. If we truly recognize it, it vanishes instantly. But because sometimes our habitual tendencies are quite solid, it's also very difficult. Therefore, it says, they need merely to realize that confusion has no ultimate basis, and the basis of their deluded thoughts will disappear. Actually, the cause of our confused consciousness does not exist, and deluded thoughts, furthermore, have nothing to rely upon. If you truly investigate it, just like the reflection of the moon in the water mentioned earlier, the cause of our confusion is without causes and conditions. Since it has no causes and conditions, the resulting effect, deluded thoughts, is also impossible to exist. There is no need for them to wish that the cause of their confusion would disappear, because no cause existed in the first place. If the cause of confusion, the cause of ignorance, doesn't even have an arising, if it has never even arisen, then how do you expect there to be a cessation of it? Arising and ceasing are actually completely unobtainable. Just like the moon's reflection in water, they are neither arising nor ceasing. It might unfailingly exist before the perceptions of us sentient beings, so this kind of illusory cause and effect is sometimes quite laughable. However, before we have severed this net of birth and death, we still need to diligently absorb the nectar-like pith instructions of our spiritual friends. We will conclude our teaching here for today.
Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye